Betting the NFL is very much like facing a firing squad, at least with the action the way it's been going, especially this season, where every game boils down to the final play or two. I guess that's been going on for a long period of time, but it seems to be even more in effect this year. Witness last night's game. The Baltimore Ravens, Cincinnati Bengals, big division rivals. Bengals fighting for their possible playoff lives. They're coming in at with a losing record at 3-4. Don't want to fall to 3-5 and end up in a disastrous spot. The Ravens look like they could be a Super Bowl candidate, but always have been vulnerable. Usually sliding in the fourth quarter and putting other teams that were otherwise thoroughly beaten into a position where they're having a chance to not only cover the spread, but maybe even win the game outright. But you may as well, I mean, here it comes down to the end. You may as well just ask for a blindfold, the last drag on a cigarette. You kind of feel like that masked wrestler that's stuck in the corner as the ref is looking the other way in a three-man tag team match. It just seems like there's no way out. You're up 7 points. The Bengals have the ball. They're facing a third down and 5 yards, third down and goal from the 5-yard line. And Joe Burrow throws a pass that goes over two leaping Raven defenders. And with the trajectory of the ball, the only thing it can do is sail into the third row with the stance. And then Jamar Chase reaches up, makes the catch. Next thing you know, you're fucked to the spread, except as is the case in degenerate gambling, 1 minute you're rooting for a team, the next minute you're rooting against them. So now you're hoping that Cincinnati kicks the extra point, goes in overtime. That's your only chance to get a push. But instead, they boldly go for 2 points there. And in spite of, if you were a Cincinnati Bengals money line player, in spite of the fact that there was holding on one side of the receiving core, there was a face mask. The guy that was about to catch the ball or had a chance to catch the ball gets tackled before it gets there. No calls. And Baltimore goes on and prevails in that game. A blindfold and a last drag on a cigarette is what you need if you're betting the National Football League. Bet Online, if you're betting, is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games and bet on them as they're happening. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL to entertainment and all kinds of different props. Head to BetOnline today to get in on all the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. That's BetOnline. The game starts here. All right, Friday, we always like to feature my favorite handicapper when it comes to college football and basketball. And in action now with the college basketball season underway. We haven't had any selections in that regard yet, at least nothing of any great significance from our handicappers on the show this week. But I would imagine as we welcome the professor into the program, Professor, I don't know how you did on your political props. That was a tough one to forecast. But have you dabbled into any college basketball as of yet?
I have not. I will probably go dancing for the first time tonight, possibly tomorrow. But any serious action will probably kick off next week.
All right.
And
Anything
no, I didn't bet any
yeah.
of the political stuff. I know a bunch of people who did. I don't, difficult. I mean, apparently a lot of people made a bunch of money in the markets. So good on them.
The late sharp money supposedly was all going on Kamala, which those guys ended up
And I
getting
don't know how
buried.
sharp it was, but yes, she surged.
Sharp as in a knife to your neck.
Yeah, she surged over the weekend, coming into election day, and then he went back up throughout the course of election day. So who knows? Again, I don't. There's actually an interview I've been meaning to watch with, I guess, some French guy who made a giant pile of money on it. I haven't gotten the chance to see it yet, but I'm curious what his analysis was.
2016. You remember the guy that used to be on Proline, Wayne Allen Root?
Yes, and became very famous politically because he was supposedly Obama's roommate at Columbia or something along those lines, and claimed he never saw Obama once the whole time they were both there in school, and so on and so on.
Yeah, he was always a little bit of a contrarian on that Proline show, which, of course, is the model for all of these handicapping shows, as it was the first ever of its type. And actually was considered to be like a regular sports show by USA Network at the time. They didn't have a whole lot of
What
offerings
I
in that regard.
mostly remember about him was he had like not quite a mullet, but like the '80s rock band
Yeah.
hairband, large and feathered and beautiful, Motley Crue hair going on doing the show. That was mostly what I remembered about Proline Wayne Allen Root.
And he was contrarian to the other guys who were insisting that they knew something that nobody else was privileged to or had knowledge that was so deeply inside that they would have to, under the threat of death if they revealed how they got it, but that it was factual and pertinent and you could
Okay,
go ahead and
can
stake
you
your life on it.
imagine the coincidence that involved there is that, Obama, who was just some dude,
Yeah,
went to college, and a big name college, Columbia's Ivy League, right?
yep.
Went to an Ivy League college with a guy who would go on to be one of the stars of freaking Proline. Like
Of a handicapper show,
the
yeah.
way the universe works is just
Yes.
absolutely freaking amazing, man. Like,
And Root made a huge score. He was sending it in 2016. I had some contact with him from
oh, I
a
remember
business
this. Yeah, he
transaction.
bet big on Trump. Yes.
Bet big on Trump and made a giant score. And then I don't know if he disappeared after that or is still offering his
Well,
handicapping services. But
he probably had to go somewhere out of the country to collect because no, 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 legitimately, this was one of the big issues is
yeah,
Poly Market, which is the big betting site that they were a lot of political forecasters started to taking the numbers from the gambling markets instead of traditional pollsters. But one of the big stories was Poly Market. You can't legally bet it in the United States, and from what I'm told, let's be honest, there's been a lot of websites where we don't take action from the United States, but it's sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like your average 10-year-old can figure out how to get around the security. I've been told Polymarket, it's actually kind of difficult as an American to get around the security and actually get a bet down there. Now, again, I didn't bet it, I know, but that's what I've read.
yeah, it's always a bummer when there's a problem collecting, or even getting down on something like that. Anyway, yeah, Root. He would always say on the show, I don't really know how I came up with this game. Where the other guys were insisting and adamant about the idea that they knew something that was beyond the scope of anybody else's relative intellect. He would just come out and say, "Man, I got fucking lucky in that one, man. I picked the Chiefs and." They managed to cover by some miracle. All right. Yeah, I mean, I was commenting before you came on about every game. It doesn't it seem like you're being presented in front of a firing squad? These NFL games at the
I
finish,
mean,
where
honestly, not just against the spread, which is always kind of brutal, but this year, money line again.
yeah,
And I don't get heavily involved in the NFL. I dabble on Sundays for entertainment purposes, keep the game interesting, kind of deal. But again, as a Dolphins fan, for example, team goes up to Buffalo and plays its ass off, and then with 20 seconds left, Jordan freaking Poyer, who's been one of the worst Dolphins signings in the history of the Dolphins, and that's saying something, uh, decides, oh, I'm just going to hit this dude in the head 3 seconds after he dropped it to set up a 62-yard field goal in Buffalo in the wind, and it goes right down the pipe. I mean, I think that's actually part of the story is that these kickers have gotten so freaking good that you actually expect them to make like everything under 60 yards and even the occasional pro 60. And then you get like last night where Justin freaking Tucker, pretty much universally hailed as the greatest kicker to ever play the game, misses an extra point, and I think it's like the third one he's missed this year. It's pretty crazy.
the distance has definitely changed dramatically. Because remember, a guy would come out for like a 49-yarder
Right.
back in the
And it would be
day.
kind of
Jim
uncertain.
Turner, a dead-on, straight-on kicker from the Jets, to come out from 49 yards, and they go,
Again,
"Oh my God, Weave's taking a chance here."
I relate this as a Dolphins fan, the great Pete Stoyanovich,
Yes,
who, like he was reasonably reliable up to like 53, 54 yards. And in those days, that was a big freaking deal. And now that's like, hey, 54 yards. Come on.
you're
I don't get
expecting
out
a
of
high
bed
school
for
kid to make it.
54. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, that was a
yes,
tough beat.
the NFL has gotten really nuts this year. Like I said, not just even to the spread, but to the money line, which is crazy.
Sure. I mean, if you had Cincinnati, you were getting probably a pretty generous price on the money line. They were 6-point dogs in the game. I don't know what that equates out to. What, about 2.5 to 1, maybe, on the money line?
I mean, really, we should have known it maybe just from that first Thursday night game where Kansas City and Baltimore go at it, and it literally comes down to a toe. Like the dude's whole
Yes.
foot was in, but that much of his toe landed out of bounds, and they caught it on replay. Amazing, man.
Yeah, it seems like every game is like that. All right, we have a big slate of just about everything coming up this weekend. We're going to zero in on some college football here with the professor on Bury Your Bookie. We've been getting off to great starts every week. Your Friday night selections have
Right,
been
and
pristine,
then
my friend.
horrible Saturdays every
Yeah,
week.
you might want to join some heavily, Orthodox religious cult, Jewish sect.
I might become a Seventh-day Adventist, so I
And
can't do anything on
just save
Saturdays.
your action from early Friday all the way through the weekend. But nonetheless, I feel we're going to come back strongly here. And the first game you're looking at is Wake Forest and Cal. And we did have Troy West, who is familiar with the Cal coach and follows that program closely because he's out there on the West Coast. Has done pretty well judging what games Cal is going to perform well in also this season. He came out and said that Cal is his selection, but you see all of the factors that he kind of alluded to and overlooked as being detrimental in this spot, and you're running with Wake Forest on this one.
No, number one, Cal has not been particularly impressive on their trips to the East Coast. They're 1-2. They do have a win over Auburn, but again, it was in a game where Auburn turned the ball over a bunch of times and basically put it in Cal's lap. They followed that with a loss to Florida State, which I know your man Troy West actually called. And then they followed that with a loss to, was it NC State?
May have
Uh,
been, yeah.
just a couple of weeks ago. Hold on, let me double check that. Yeah, excuse me, I lost to Pitt, and then a home loss to NC State. So they have actually lost 3 of their last 4. Excuse me, 4 of their last 5 in the ACC. Not the greatest start off to ACC play for the Cal Bears. They have to come West Coast to East Coast for a Friday night kickoff. Again, that's certainly not nearly as damning as coming west to east for a noon kickoff, but it's also in the middle of the week where you have the time change. I think we're all a little freaked out how dark it gets at like 5:45 at night. So, again, that could play with your rhythm. That could be somewhat of a deal. A lot on that West Coast to East Coast travel for a Friday night game. Again, during a time change. My main thing really here is that the Wake Forest offense over the last month has really come together. And if you do not see it regularly, which I don't think Cal's seen it at all, is that slow mesh offense. Wake Forest, the only team in the country that runs it, really can throw defenses off here. Now, fortunately for Wake Forest opponents early in the season, didn't matter because the offense was all out of rhythm, a bunch of new parts. Over the last month, it's really started to melt, which again, you look at that, it's a screwy offense. You can see where it would take middle of the year before it really started to gel. I think that's what's happened. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit of a shootout game here. Cal's had some moments, particularly against Miami, where they looked somewhat competent offensively. They, excuse me, they do have a running game.
Yeah, I mean, they were in there with a legitimate shot by all
But I
rights,
don't want to
but
lay
for a call, they could have won that game.
I don't want to lay 7.5 on the road in a shootout game. Again, I think that slow mesh will give Cal a lot of problems, and I think you get a home team now above a touchdown. It was at a touchdown yesterday, and I wanted to take it at 7. I certainly want to take it more at 7.5. I don't want to be a problem. I think Wake Forest, like I said, the offense has really come around in their last 4 ball games. I look for that to continue. They're at home playing a West Coast team, coming to the East Coast. Seems like a pretty simple decision to me.
Home dog getting a 7 on the hook now. Wake Forest over Cal, the professor's first play here on Bury Your Bookie. You're also looking at a couple of games, and you have a tendency to stay out of these on your official plays. The
Right?
so-called marquee games on the ledger here. The first of which obviously is a big one: Georgia and Ole Miss.
Kind of a spot here where everybody's kind of clubbing Georgia this week for only beating Florida by 2 touchdowns. I personally look at it a little bit differently. You beat a rival by 2 scores. Yes, now the line was just above 2 touchdowns, 14.5 or 15, so they did not cover. But in a situation where you had your defensive game plan thrown out in the middle of the second quarter when Lagway got hurt and Florida had to switch from a running quarterback, Lagway, to a pocket passing quarterback, their third teamer was never expected to play this week. Now you say, well, yeah, but they played against the third teamer. They should automatically. When you get tossed again, we see this all the time in baseball. Teams will, have a starting pitcher who throws 96 miles an hour. back it up by a guy who, throws a 70-mile-an-hour curveball,
Yeah.
and the batters look like they're totally lost. That can happen in football too. You expect a certain style of offense, you get a total mix up that can throw your defense off. So I wasn't down on Georgia for that win over Florida. I thought overall it was a pretty nice win. You hung 34 points on them. You won by 2 touchdowns in a rivalry spot. I think, but even if you think that was a bad game for Georgia, well, the pattern under Kirby Smart has been to struggle with mediocre SEC competition and then come back the next week and beat the hell out of quality teams, or come back 2 weeks later. I think that's what we're looking at here. I am not a Lane Kiffin fan. You and I discussed it on the show the other day. I think the number's 1-11 against top 5 teams throughout his career. Now that has been in some less than advantageous spots, but I would say you're in a less than advantageous spot uh, here. Yes, even though you're home and you're ranked number 12, you're facing a team that's won 2 of the last 3 national titles and 2 of the last 3 SEC titles. So I don't see any reason to stray from the pattern. Georgia comes in with another win against a top tier opponent.
Yeah, it's startling that his numbers in these spots, top five, top 10 teams, very similar to Franklin at Penn State. And people, you would think, after this last loss to Ohio State, definitely feel like that there's a lot more to those numbers. But I believe, like you do, that Kiffin hasn't always had. He has accumulated some of this negativity with teams that figured to get hammered in those spots. So that may be a little bit of misnomer, but you're still saying that Georgia's going to overcome whatever it is that Ole Miss is able to throw at them offensively. Georgia was laying 2.5 last time I checked to Ole Miss. That is the pick of the professor here. So we have Wake Forest getting 7.5, Georgia laying 2.5, and you're also looking at the Alabama LSU game.
Yep. Again, as they say in boxing, styles make fights. I think we got a similar thing here. If you watch that LSU game a couple weeks ago against Texas A&M, cruising in the first half against the pocket passing quarterback. The same thing to Ole Miss a couple weeks ago against Jackson Dart, another pocket quarterback. Then all of a sudden, Elko and Texas A&M switched to his running quarterback, and LSU's defense looked completely lost. This is a recurring pattern with Brian Kelly defenses over the years. They always seem to struggle with, I don't want to say run first quarterback, but quarterbacks who can damage you both with their legs and their arms, and that is Jaden Milroe's ball game. I think he is almost perfect matchup built to go in and get a win in Death Valley. Again, we'll be able to. I don't want to say dominate, but really, it's dominate the game with his legs, because I don't think LSU's defense adjusts well to that at all. On the other hand, Alabama, always known for being strong in the defensive backfield, should be able to match up well with the strength of the LSU offense, which is their wide receivers. They don't run the football very well. I freely admit, going to LSU, going to Death Valley at night has been a tough spot over the years, less so under Brian Kelly. And I think Alabama will manage to overcome that.
All right, looking at
Excuse
Alabama
me.
to go ahead and cover the 2.5 against Louisiana State University. You've never have you tempered your opinion of Brian Kelly as a lousy game day coach, or you still
No,
hate him like poison? Yeah.
no, I pretty much still hate him like poison.
Okay, very good. All right, we're going for a four-bagger here, and many wise guys. It seems like the line is pivoting in the direction of Utah in this BYU Utah game. I had it earlier in the week at 4.5. You say it may be going all the way down to like 2.5 right now.
Yeah, we
So
talked about this yesterday at 3. I just saw it about 15 minutes ago at 2.5, and it's not particularly surprising because, as you said, a lot of the smart money people uh, have been on Utah this week. I just don't see it. Again, I do understand they're home in a rivalry game, but if you've watched Utah, this is a program that has just absolutely been in shambles. And honestly, all the things Utah football has built on, they are bad at this year. They're bad defensively against the run. We saw that a couple weeks ago against Arizona State. They don't tackle particularly well. Now, offensively, it's a little bit stilted because they don't have a passing game, so it's much easier to defend their run. But they don't run the football as well as they have in the past. On the other hand, BYU, I think, has probably been the most consistently underrated team by gamblers all year long, and I think that pattern continues on. I personally would make this game at least north of 4, maybe north of 5 points here. You're now getting it at 2. It looks like 2.5, but at least at 3. I think you're getting a huge bargain on a team that has been underrated by the gambling public and the sharp bettors pretty much all season long. A lot of people rushed to bet UCF against them a couple weeks ago. We talked about it. SMU was a 12.5 point favorite over them earlier in the year. I think what we've seen with BYU is that they are a team really consistent in all phases of the game. Now, we faded them a couple weeks ago against Oklahoma State, but again, that was about a matchup. And I don't think Utah matches up well in this situation. Will Utah maybe have a little bit of emotion? Maybe, but I mean, if you look at this Utah team, they have consistently failed in all the big spots they played this season. I don't see why that pattern will break this week. Give me BYU minus the points.
All right, the four-bagger from the professor, Wake Forest, plus 7.5. Georgia laying 2.5 to Ole Miss. Alabama, 2.5 to LSU. And BYU, that line down to either 2.5 or 3 against Utah, where the money has come pouring in the
Again, we'll
last
give
couple of
you
days.
again, we'll give you caution that, if you go wherever it is on social media, wherever it is on the internet, you will find a lot of the sharp picks picking Utah. We disagree. We're fading that and going to the other side.
All right, we've only seen one or two games, but any general impressions about the early stages of college basketball so far? Have you formulated any kind of opinions on tendencies, trends, teams that are going to be good, teams that didn't figure to be good, anything along those lines, Professor, from the early
I'm
action?
I mean, a lot of people on Duke early, of course, led by freshman sensation Cooper Flagg there. They did look pretty impressive in their first game. Can't lie about that. Kansas comes in as number one in the country. I have my doubts about, again, we talked about it on a different show. Bill Self running from the front has historically not been a good thing. They're more in that stalker chaser position. Seems to be where the best from. Obviously, Gonzaga was very impressive on opening night, although some of that had to do with Baylor looking a little bit disjointed and good shooting. I've only watched a few games, so I can't get too definitive on it. Two things I would look at tonight. You've got North Carolina going to Kansas. Top 10 matchups. 7.5 looks a little heavy to me. I would be inclined to take the points there. Not that I necessarily think North Carolina is going to go in and get a win, but I would be inclined to get the points there. And then tomorrow you've got another ranked matchup. Who is it? It's Houston and somebody. Who is Houston playing? I got Houston and Auburn tomorrow, 9:30. Caution because the total could be really low. But if it's anywhere in the 120, 125 range, I'd be inclined to go under. Most of the feature matchups with Houston for the last 5 or 6 years tend to go ugly and under. So those would be two spots if I were going to get involved this weekend that I'd be looking to go.
Where do you weigh in officially at this point on the debate about Bill Self and whether or not that's a piece or not, a
I
piece
know
or no
you and
piece?
Louie are very
The
convinced of
hairpiece
this.
issue. What do you think?
I've never been close. It does not look like a rug on television,
No, it looks great. I mean,
but you and Louie have been up close.
it
And
looks a little funky, like questionable. You would have
it,
to, say, hey,
one of
I
those.
mean, what kind of job it was done here? But when you go by the back, I mean, it's a dead giveaway. And we live in South Florida, so we know hairpieces. They come flying in the wind almost every day, and you'll see guys, and you're just kind of thinking, really, he looked in the mirror this morning and thought that looked good. All
Again,
right,
I've never seen the angle that personally makes me think it's a wig, but I will accept the Luby and Defoe argument because, of course, you
stood
two
right behind him,
right
and
next to him at the bar and are both convinced
dead
100%.
giveaway. That separation in the back. That separation in the back is a dead giveaway. No amount of super glue or gorilla glue or any of that stuff can get rid of that for some reason. And for those reasons, as they say on Shark Tank, I believe it's a piece.
Okay, well, maybe he needs to go and get some of that
But
that Russell
all
Deal
other
wig
aspects
hand.
of it, all other aspects of it
It
are
does not look like
sensational.
a wig on TV. I got to say,
No,
on
no.
TV, it looks like very natural hair. But
I mean, it looks less like
Congratulations,
a piece than Gene Cady. I mean, when
right?
he was at Purdue, I remember that where he looked like the manager of the Undertaker, Paul Bearer, had the same hair. All right, all right. Good luck with all your picks, Professor. Wake Forest, Georgia, Alabama, BYU. That's what we're looking at. A quartet of victories here for the professor. It is always a pleasure, my friend. Good luck with all your wagers, and we'll talk to you again next week.
You guys have a great one.
All right, the professor here on Bury Your Bookie. Got touched up a little bit last Saturday. He's been very good on these Friday games, so you might want to look at Wake Forest tonight against Cal. Troy West, one of our handicappers, has been doing very well for us. So all year long, joins us every Wednesday. He's all in on Cal and is willing to lay the points. Now, it was at 7 when he was speaking with us on Wednesday. Now 7.5, so more favorable. Swung a little bit towards the direction of the professor on that one. As we're looking at NFL teams against the spread, Lions still on top of that, 7-1. Washington 7-1-1. These are the best of the best. Minnesota 6-2 in the NFC, and Zona 6-3, surprising Arizona. It's been surprising some people with these last-second victories in games that are they're one ugly, are they not? And in the AFC, top teams against the spread, the Colts, surprisingly, and that was one of the selections yesterday of Mike Jones. He likes the Colts this week, and they're getting 4 points. They're 7-2 against the spread, performing very well for the degenerate in you. Pittsburgh Steelers involved in a big matchup this week against the Commanders. I was talking earlier in the week with Ian Eagle, the CBS announcer, on another show, and he loves this matchup. He's going to be doing a game, and he says that whoever emerges from this one, it may be destined to do some really big things. So we'll find out who's for real in that one. But Pittsburgh 6-2 against the spread. The Denver Broncos, who were given up for dead early in the season, they were throwing in the towel early on the Denver Broncos season. Darlings of the point spread right now are close to it at 6-3, and wow, just. So some serious ugliness. That's the AFC, top in the AFC. In the NFC, you've got the worst of it. Cowboys 2-5-1. Figures to get worse. The Giants 2-6. They're laying 6 points this week. I think 6.5 against Carolina. So that might be something to look into if you're a against the spread trend better. Seattle, after getting off to a 3-0 straight-up start, now 2-6-1 against the spread in Carolina. It's been a bet against every week. Last week they buried you by winning on the money line, but 2-7 against the spread. And you have the worst in the AFC, Tennessee 1-7. They're horrendous. Miami surprisingly 2-6, and they're only getting 1 point from the Rams on the road this week. And Cleveland and the Jets at 3-6. So tread carefully, ladies and gentlemen. Every NFL game, it seems like, is like it's Gary Gilmore time. It really is. The last guy to be facing a firing squad in the United States while being put to death for crimes against humanity. And literally, they give him a blindfold, the last rag on a cigarette, and a bunch of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and boom. You're just hoping they miss. That's how it's been if you're at the finish of an NFL game, because there couldn't have been more writing and about to change in the last seconds, inside the last minute of that Ravens-Bengals game last night, including the spread, which the Bengals ended up covering, and then the money line, which went up in smoke when the Bengals decided to go for 2. I'm not sure I agree with that move. I guess in certain circumstances, you rush up there and go ahead and try and fire it in there. Figure you had a 50% chance maybe of making that conversion versus do you have a 50-50 chance of winning in overtime with the advantage of winning the coin flip, giving you a chance to close out the game without the other team getting the ball? Something Roger Goodell should look into now that a lot of money is being wagered on this stuff. All right, you guys, good luck with all your plays over the weekend. Hope we gave you some help here throughout the week. We'll do it again on Monday. Thanks for joining us here on NoFilter.net, the various other platforms that carry the show. For the people at Bet Online and Greenlight Ventures, I'm Jeff DeForrest, and hoping everybody has a shot on this beautiful weekend in the fall to bury your bookie.